Just how big of a gap is there between Malik Nabers and Rome Odunze? Not that big at all. We will explain why on this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today is a very excited Kate Madjuk, who you can follow on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. And that's because we're discussing Washington wide receiver Rome Odunze, who got a feeling might be Kate's favorite player in this class. Kate, let's just start with the film. What did you see from Rome when you put him on tape?
Yeah, Rome Odunze, just an absolute force and such a strong wide receiver, Marcus. Looking at Rome Odunze, 4-year receiver coming out of Washington, has a lot of all of the traits that you would just love. He's 21 years old, 6'2", 7/8 inches, just under that 6'3" mark. That ranks in the 77th percentile for wide receivers, 212 pounds, back-to-back seasons with 1,100 plus receiving yards. This final season led the NCAA with over 1,600 receiving yards, led the Pac-12 in receiving yards in back-to-back seasons. I think the biggest thing that pops off the page when you watch Rome Odunze is the level of safety that he has. He's so reliable, but the play strength, the play strength, and obviously that also can come with size at a certain point, but he moves much better for a guy of his stature and his overall build. He moves pretty fluidly, a solid route runner. And I mean, the play strength, the lower body strength. I mean, there are times, Marcus, where he is making his runs and maybe, in a contested catch situation, it feels like he's always getting 1 to 2 steps after that catch, even though he's not like a yards after the catch aficionado, but they're not open yards after the catch. He's like dragging defenders down the field at times because he's got some really nice lower body strength. And I think I really like Rome Odunze. And I got to be honest, Marcus, the more I'm thinking on it, the more I think, I mean, I think he probably has a safer floor than Malik Nabers when I'm thinking about how he's going to translate to the pro level. And I think his ceiling could be pretty similar. So like, I think you're looking at 1A and 1B at wide receiver 2 for me, as opposed to, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Nabers in tier 1. I think this gap is much, much smaller than consensus would have you believing.
I think Rome is one of the cleanest wide receiver prospects that we've had come into the NFL in a long time. Now, at the end of this show, I'm going to give you my comp for him. But in terms of like a prospect, he really reminds me a lot of Amari Cooper, who came out in 2015, where Amari just checked every single box. Hey, does you have good production? Check. Do you have good size? Check. How about the speed and the athleticism? Check. Can you make plays down the field? Like, Rome just does everything well. Now, maybe he doesn't do, a couple things at an A+ level, but it's like the sum is greater than the parts, right? Like, you put all these together, all these B+ traits together, and you got an A+ wide receiver prospect. Kate, you were asking me just today, like, hey, do you have some like strengths and weaknesses so we can build out these graphics for YouTube, which you should check out, by the way. And when it came to Rome Odunze's strengths, it's like literally everything you want from a top end receiver. Fantastic size, great body control. He does such a good job of tracking the football when he's down the field, when it's in the air. He's an amazing route runner. Like, he can create separation. and he can win in contested catch situations. And this is what's different from him compared to some other receivers in the league. Usually the guys that create separation don't win a lot when it comes to contested catch stuff. I'm going to use Amari Cooper as an example. Amari can do it, not his strength. Deontay Johnson, one of the NFL's best separators, doesn't really win contested catch situations. So to be able to run routes and make plays down the field and to win in contested catch spots, it's really rare. Rome was an unbelievable prospect.
Yeah, and I do think just in comparison, again, the top of this draft class here at wide receiver, just so rich that again, you look at Rome Odunze and I think you could very much make a case that he would be the wide receiver one in the 2023 class, much like, a Malik Nabers would be, or, Marvin Harrison Jr., wide receiver one in most classes. But because this is such a top heavy class, it's really hard to look and it feels like you're nitpicking a little bit between these top end players. But I think the comparison, when you look at maybe the flashiness of the speed of a Malik Nabers, obviously, I'm not gonna say there's really anything that's overhyped about Marvin Harrison Jr., but
No.
like he's Rome Odunze doesn't have, I think, as much flash to his game. It's not necessarily going to be a endless highlight reel with him, but I think he does all the little things right. And I think that's what's going to endear him to a lot of good teams, Marcus, that like because of where he's being drafted or, being projected to be drafted as the wide receiver 3 in this class, that's going to make some interesting potential landing spots that could be really, really intriguing for his fantasy value long term.
And we'll get to where he's being ranked later in the show in terms of his value. That's actually my concern with Rome Odunze is I think there's a chance that he could land in a situation where he's already paired up with a Garrett Wilson or a DJ Moore and a Keenan Allen. And now he's being asked to be like a Z receiver, and he's not a team's focal point, where it feels like Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Nabers are going to be focal points of their offenses right away just because of where they're being drafted. I'm not so sure that's going to be the case with Rome, but we'll get to that later in the segment. I did want to go over his weaknesses because he's not a perfect prospect. He needs to work on beating press coverage. He just didn't face a lot of it in the Pac-12. And when he did, some of those corners gave him problems. Again, that a lot of that can be cleaned up with experience. And then you mentioned it at the top of the show. He's not overly dynamic after the catch. He's not a zero, but I think he's somebody who kind of just gets what's there for him. He is a separator. He is a contested catch winner. He's not somebody that you're going to throw screens to and get jet sweeps to and all that kind of stuff. Like that's just not his game. And it's fine. And it's probably what makes him a very, very good prospect and not an elite one. But those are the only big flaws that I see in his game.
That list is pretty darn short. And I mean, for the number of strengths that we've talked about, the fact that we have so few weaknesses to really highlight here, I think just shows you what a complete and well-rounded prospect that Rome Odunze is. And I do think for all the question marks, Marcus, that you might have for, where he ends up and whether or not he's going to be the focal point of the offense, we'll talk about it later. I don't really care because I think that his skill set perfectly complements any kind of role you could be asked of him, but definitely more than capable, I think, of being that true X receiver, being that focal point of the offense because he can do a little bit of everything.
All right, let's dive into some more numbers with Rome Odunze, one of our favorite prospects in this class. We will do that next. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Gametime is the fastest and the easiest way to buy tickets for all of the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Gametime is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. See the view from your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All-in prices show your total upfront so you know that you're getting a great deal before you check out. Buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem promo code Locked On for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We want to let you know about Locked On Sports Today. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Do you have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that unnecessary screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Kate, let's dive into some numbers with Rome Odunze. And as you would expect, they're very good.
They're very good. I do want to start quickly with just highlighting his combine and the data that we got, because one of the only top receivers that we actually got some actual real combine data for. If you're watching along with us on YouTube, you can check out, we have the spider chart here, courtesy of mockdraftable.com, which just shows you, again, we've talked about how well-rounded a prospect he is on the field. I think his overall athleticism testing numbers showcase a lot of that. You have the height and weight, size, speed combination. You look at the vertical jump, 85th percentile, broad jump, 69th percentile, 40-yard dash, 69th percentile at that frame of, just under 6'3", 212 pounds. Only thing that you're really lacking there is like hand size. But Marcus, you look at the hand size at 9.25 inches. That's 40th percentile for wide receivers. That is not an issue on tape. He does not have issues with drops. His strength at the catch point, not at all an issue. So like from a combine perspective, I think he had a great day.
Yeah, and he measured in significantly bigger than Malik Nabers. Malik Nabers did not run at all. It remains to be seen whether he runs at LSU's Pro Day. Again, I just want to keep mentioning that he's just checked every single box that you want from a number one receiver. Size, speed, explosiveness. And if you watch the NFL Combine, I mean, he dominated the drills. Like it wasn't a question at all who was the best receiver in the drills. It was just so obvious. He's so smooth. Everything about his profile shows or signals, hey, this guy is going to be an absolute superstar in the NFL. And in 10 of the last 14 drafts, he would be the number one wide receiver. I go back, like, I'm a big Drake London fan. Like, not going to say anything bad about Drake London. Rome is twice the prospect that Drake London was. And there's a good chance that Rome. Yeah, and there's a good chance that Rome gets drafted behind pick 8, which is where Drake London went in the 2022 class. It's wild that this is the third best receiver to class because, again, everything about him profiles as a bona fide number one receiver.
Let's take a look at some of his advanced stats. So obviously reviewed the combine. Let's take a look at his stats from the 2022 and 2023 seasons where, graded out fantastically. 90th plus percentile in PFF receiving grade, contested catch percentage, drop rate, ranked 78th percentile in terms of separation percentage, 84th percentile in yards per route run. All of these metrics that we look to as potential indicators of long-term success in the NFL, he absolutely dominated. Even college dominator rating, 26.4%, only ranked in the 43rd percentile, but had a 19.3 breakout age, 84th percentile. We love to see early production from these wide receivers. It translates very well to the NFL. And you saw that with Rome. And he became the focal point of his offense, and he had no problem handling that.
No, and we should also mention that Rome played with two other receivers who are probably going to be top 100 picks in this year's draft, and still posted a 1,600-yard season this year with 13 touchdowns. Even last year was 1,100 yards and 7 touchdowns. So when you get a receiver that has like back-to-back 1,100-yard seasons in a big conference like the Pac-12 that has scored over 20 touchdowns combined over the last 2 years, it's pretty rare. And then, Kate, if you could throw back up that graphic of some of the advanced stats, it's contested catch percentage is one of these percentages that it's really hard to make a living on in the NFL, right? Like, because it's just not a very sticky stat. We see this go up and down a lot, right? But if you're creating separation and you're efficient, which he does both very well, and the receiving grade overall is really good, you can live with some of the inconsistencies as a contested catch player. It's why I'm just so confident that he's going to be a successful NFL player. There isn't just one part of his game that he relies on for success. And even if you use somebody like Malik Nabers, who is widely expected to go higher than Rome, Nabers' calling card is his athleticism, right? It's that he's going to be more explosive than every other cornerback in the league. There are going to be matchups where he faces somebody who is as athletic as him, or guys that know how to use his technique against him. Rome is just so clean in being able to win with separation, being able to win with route running, being able to win as an outside receiver, being able to win from the slot, being able to win downfield. Like, there's just so many different things that he can do at a high level, which is going to make him really hard to defend at the next level.
I really genuinely believe that Rome is one of the safest prospects you can get, and because of the situation with these other players in the draft this year, he is going to be the biggest steal both in the NFL draft and in your dynasty rookie drafts. That, man, dynasty managers, NFL GMs, y'all hit the jackpot, because you might get one of the cleanest prospects that we've seen in quite a while at a huge value. Because again, like, there's not that one calling card, Marcus. He does everything well, and that can be kind of boring at a certain point, right? You want one thing to really grasp onto. I don't think there is really anything with Rome that is like his absolute calling card, because he's so good at a lot of different things. And that, some people will say, what is it? Jack of all trades, master of none.
Not the case here.
That's not the case here. He is a master of the wide receiver position.
All right, let's talk about his dynasty value, because you referenced it. And I also want to give some player comps for Rome Odunze, because I've seen some good ones. I've seen some bad ones. Kate, I think you and I are going to be on the same page here. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets, because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a number one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's number one sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines, and you can even pick who's going to win the entire tournament. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. All right, Kate. This is my favorite segment of the show. I love doing player comps. It's probably my favorite thing for the draft. Who did you compare Rome Odunze to when you watched him play?
He's giving Davante Adams vibes.
Yeah.
And actually, a guy we're going to talk about on tomorrow's show, Nico Collins. I'm gonna say he's like a perfectly blended. Throw Davante Adams and Nico Collins in a blender for me, and I think you'd get something along the lines of Rome Odunze. But I think maybe a bit more polished than either of those. So, like, the best version of those two receivers coming together for me. It's the play strength. It's the finesse. It's doing all these little things right. That I mean, is that too rich? I don't know. You tell me.
So Devontae Adams is my comp as well. And I'm not talking about him as a prospect. I'm talking about him as a player in the NFL where there's nothing about Devontae Adams' game that is overly flashy. Like, he's not fantastic after the catch. He's a good route runner. He creates good separation. He's got strong hands. He's not a 4.30 type of receiver. But in his prime, when he's healthy, he was a lock to get 1,600 yards and double-digit touchdowns every year because he was just going to be a part of your game plan every week because you can't guard him. And that's the way I feel about Rome Odunze. I've seen other people compare him to Larry Fitzgerald, Daniel Jeremiah of NFL.com. If you want to go with a really lofty comparison, that's a good one. Amari Cooper is another one that I mentioned at the top of the show. I think he's very similar to Amari Cooper, who has been a 1,000-yard receiver in the NFL for basically the last decade. Every player that you kind of comp him to ends up being a bona fide wide receiver one. Again, I have a hard time seeing how he fails in the NFL unless he lands in a situation where he's either the number 2 receiver or number 3 receiver and just gets buried a little bit, or he lands in a situation with like Daniel Jones in New York and they're just not able to get him the football consistently. But I think he's going to be able to out-survive those situations, right? Like, he'll be on this Giants team 3 years later. They'll have a different quarterback. They'll have a different coach that's able to get him the football. Again, I just don't see how he fails.
Yeah, and because of that sort of level of safety for me, Marcus, the ADP just feels out of control right now. Currently sitting in the most recent Dynasty startup batch of ADP, wide receiver 18, and that is behind the likes of DJ Moore, Devonta Smith. I'm looking at Rome Odunze and I'm saying, like, the floor feels pretty, pretty safe. I'm getting a 21-year-old who's going to turn 22 over the summer with a full rookie contract ahead of him. I'll take Rome over a DJ Moore, over a Devonta Smith. I think
all day.
Like, out of the gate, you can lock and load him as a top 15 dynasty wide receiver, and pending landing spot could make his way into the top 12.
So right now in Dynasty Superflex drafts, he's going 6 overall. Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr., Jaden Daniels, Drake May, Malik Nabers, Rome Odunze. For me, Kate, I want to have a top 7 pick in my Superflex rookie drafts. And if I've got like pick 4, I'm more than willing to slide down a couple spots if it guarantees me a Rome Odunze or a Brock Bowers, because I think those guys are just elite prospects. And I'm not so sure the difference between Malik Nabers at 4 and Rome Odunze at 6 is all that big. And I'd rather just have the extra, whether it's draft capital or extra player. Give me the difference in the 2 players right there, because I love Rome Odunze.
I might be the only person in the world that's going to say it right now, but I do think Odunze is worth consideration as your wide receiver 2 in Dynasty. Like I said, he's a little bit older than Malik Nabers. He doesn't have that flash, that athleticism, the jaw-dropping speed, but he doesn't need it, Marcus, because he's got about 50 other aspects to his game that I think are going to make this floor on a year-to-year basis. Immediately stepping into the league, I think he could be an every year, like, locked and loaded, 1,000 receiving yard, 10 touchdown kind of guy. And I think he could immediately step into that role in the right situation.
I'm glad I'm not one of these teams that has to figure this out, because like if I'm the Chargers at 5, right, and Marvin Harrison Jr. is off the board, everybody's been mocking them Malik Nabers at pick number 5. I would be really tempted to try to trade down a couple spots and pick up Rome to pair with Justin Herbert. If I got stuck and I couldn't trade out of that spot, it wouldn't take me much to be convinced to take Rome at 5 over Nabers, because of the safety, because of the extra little bit of size. You get an extra 3 inches or more at height. We have not had an official measurement on Malik Nabers. Did not measure in at the NFL Combine. Plus, I've seen multiple years of high-end production.
Yeah, you'll take that all day.
I really, really like Rome, and I really want him to land in a good situation. I think he's one of the most fun players in this entire draft. You and I are huge Rome Odunze fans. We're hoping and praying that he lands with a good quarterback in a good situation. Because if he does, all systems
Wheels
go.
up, baby. Wheels
go.
up.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen every single day. Go check out the channel on YouTube. We post videos every single day over there. Go download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Majuk. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. And we will see you right back here tomorrow with Matt Williamson, where we're discussing some of the biggest ADP risers and whether you should be buying, selling, or holding. We will see you right here tomorrow.